Hello everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and in this video we are going to begin learning how to create games in 3D in Godot. Hopefully you have taken my Game Development 1 class and you've learned the two-dimensional development where we focus on the X and the Y axes. In this video we are going to add in the third axis. We're going to add in the Z axis. Most of the games you've played are three-dimensional. That's what this course focuses on, is three-dimensional game development. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to name this project, I don't know, 3D platformer. That's a pretty decent name for a 3D platformer, I guess. I can go back and change it later. This is going to be the project that we use to work on the first project in this class. So if you have an idea of what you want to name yours, you can name it something. What we're essentially going to build first is a very small platforming game with a character that can jump around on platforms and collect items and whatever else we want to add to it. So I'm just going to call this 3D platformer. I'm going to make sure it's in the correct folder. Yeah, documents is fine for me. Again, you might want to save yours in a different folder. I'm totally fine with this. We also want to make sure we are grabbing the forward plus renderer. Because we're working in 3D, we want the best 3D graphics renderer available to us. So we're going to use the forward plus renderer. And I'm going to create an edit. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. We'll give it a minute. Oh, hey, that was faster than I expected. Okay, so let's talk about, we already know what the scene view or the scene menu, the file system, the inspector. If you're a little bit rusty on those, it'll come to you as we're working on this first project. Let's talk about this view, however, because this is going to be the new thing that we have to pay attention to. If you remember, in 2D view, it was very simple, right? Whatever you see on the screen, that's what you see, right? In 3D view, it's a bit different. We have, you can see in the distance, there's a horizon line. Your axis lines are here. It's a bit more difficult to see what's going on. Let me give you some tips on how to control this, this view. A lot of things are done through the mouse wheel. If you scroll the mouse wheel down, then you'll be zooming out. Scroll the mouse wheel in, you will zoom in. If you hold the mouse wheel or click it down, you can pan around the central point. So I can click that mouse wheel and I can drag it so I can pan around my scene. If you hold the right mouse button, you can kind of pivot from wherever the camera is right now. It's kind of like moving your head, right? If I hold the right mouse button and I use the WASD keys, I can move around just like I'm in a first-person shooter, right? Or in a first-person game. Basically, I can fly my camera around my scene so that I can check out everything from all different angles, okay? Perfect. All right, beautiful. Another way we can change our view is up here. In this menu, it'll show us our axes that are labeled. We have the y-axis, which is the horizontal axis represented by this green line. We have the x-axis, which is I said horizontal. I meant vertical axis for the y-axis. We have the x-axis, which is a horizontal axis. That's represented by the red line here. And we have the z-axis, which is basically depth, okay? And we can see that represented by the blue line. We can change our view to snap to one of these axes just by clicking on it here. So if I want to snap to the y-axis, I click that and I get a top-down view of the game. So I can see what the game looks like from the top. I can click it again to get, I can click these other axes to get a different view. So this is from the x-axis. I can see the z. So I'm basically getting a side view of what's going on. So I have the z-axis here and the y-axis. I can do the same thing with z. I can see a full-on front view of what's happening as well. Okay, and I can click these dots to kind of get the view that I want, right? And you can see over here, it's telling you what the view looks like. So right now I'm looking at a bottom view. I'm looking at my game from underneath. If I click here, I have a left orthogonal view, meaning I'm looking at the left side. Here's the rear. Here's the right. Here's a front view. So you can see which view you're looking at here. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's start building a level, okay? If you remember, every scene in Godot is built using nodes. And our scenes in our 2D games were 2D scenes. Let's use a 3D scene node so that we can find other nodes to place in here, and we can use the proper 3D nodes. Now, pretty much everything in Godot 3D is going to be built using just some kind of shape. Generally, we refer to 3D shapes as meshes. Let's go ahead and add a new mesh just to show you kind of what this looks like. So I'm going to use a mesh instance 3D node, which is going to instantiate a mesh into my scenario, into my scene. Okay, now nothing's happened. That's okay. The reason why nothing has happened is because we have not told it what kind of mesh we want. Basically, what is my mesh shape going to be? Now, we can use all different kinds of shapes. I'm just going to throw down a basic box mesh, and notice that it right there, it gives me a preview of the box. It's just a gray box. I'm going to zoom in so I can see the box there. Okay, pretty easy. Now I have these orange. I have an orange boundary showing me the boundaries of the mesh. I'm just kind of looking at it from different angles. Notice that some sides are darker than the others. That's because in a 3D view, we have a sun. We have a light source by default. We can turn off this light source. Basically, this is being simulated right now. We can turn this off using this button. We can turn off our simulated light source and then everything looks the same. Or we can turn it back on and we can get some light so we can see what it looks like with some global lighting is what that's called. We're going to talk a lot about lighting and stuff later. We can also turn off preview environment. What that'll do is that turns off the horizon, the skybox, everything else that's making up this view. We can create custom environments, which we will get into at some point. For now, let's just turn on our custom environment so that we can see naturally what this looks like. Okay, let's talk a bit about this mesh. This is just a standard 3D box. Now the thing about this mesh is it's kind of, think about it kind of like a sprite in 2D. It's there, but it's kind of not there, right? There's no collision here. We haven't told it how it should look yet. We haven't attached any artwork to it. We haven't added a collider here. It's just kind of a box sitting there. We can do all kinds of things to it. We can change the size of this thing by modifying its scale. We can change the size of sides, or that's movement, sorry. We can change the scale on specific axes. We can rotate. We can do all kinds of things with this particular mesh, okay? But one thing that we haven't done yet is we haven't talked about how to design this thing. Now, in 2D development, we relied a lot on artwork that either we created or artwork we found on the internet to design the things we were making. We can do the same thing in 3D. Artwork that we use to design a mesh is called a texture. So we can use textures that we find on the internet to wrap them around a mesh to make the mesh look the way we want it to. Right now, we're not going to use a texture just yet. We'll talk about textures more in a later video. Right now what we're going to do is we're just going to focus on creating a material that allows us to recolor this mesh. So the way we do that is we want to click on the mesh itself in our Mesh Instance 3D Inspector menu. And here there's a lot of things we can change about it. We want to go down to Resource. Actually, no, not Resource. Do we want to modify the mesh here? Well, there's some things we can talk about here. We can flip the faces of our mesh, meaning flip it so that it's more of an inverted mesh. We can add UV2 if we want. UV2 is basically padding for light mapping if we're doing some custom lightings. Oh yeah, here we go. This is the material I was looking for. In here, we have an option called material. Right now, it's an empty material, so we don't really have anything decorating this mesh. If we click in here and create a new standard material, notice that now it's a flat white, right? No longer is it that gray mesh. Now it's a flat white mesh. And if we click on the material here, we have all kinds of options on how to design this material so that it looks different. We can set its transparency, so we can turn on the transparency so that we can actually see through it a little bit. Okay, let's turn that off. We have shading, we have color out. So this is vertex color. Vertex color is different from albedo. Albedo is your actual color of the mesh. So if we click on albedo, we can go to color, we get a color picker, we can find a nice color. Ooh, that's a nice blue. So that's now the color of my mesh. The vertex color is different. The vertex color is, well, don't worry about that. That's a little bit more complicated than I want to get into. Now with albedo, you can apply a flat color. You can also apply a texture. If you have a texture that you want to apply to this material, you can do that here as well. We can change the metallic properties of this thing. Basically, if this object is supposed to be more metallic, we can modify that. The changes in metallicity look a whole lot better with an actual texture applied. So you're probably not going to see too many changes here. Roughness, emission, you know, all this stuff you can play around with. Check it out. See if you can find some cool options to make your meshes look nice. Okay, so that's changing the color using a material. Now let's talk about colliders. So how does this object get collision? Well, we could do the standard collision shape 3D now because it's three-dimensional. And we can apply a shape to it, box shape, sure. And what is the error here? Only serves to provide a collision shape to collision object 3D derived node. So we're already having an issue here. It only wants me to use a collision shape 3D in this way if I'm doing something like an area or a static body or something like that. Right now we have a mesh instance. Now this mesh instance, I could attach it to a static body 3D object to basically turn it into a physical object that we can then apply a collision to. But I'm not going to do that. There's actually an easier way to add colliders to a mesh. If we select our mesh instance and come over here to our mesh menu, we can say create collision shape. We're going to, the collision shape placement is going to be a sibling of this thing, of this mesh, and we'll use tri-mesh. Tri-mesh is your standard mesh collision shape instance. So let's click create. Now we have a collision shape 3D. Oh, we're getting the same error. Let's actually use, let's instead of making it a sibling, let's make it a static body child. There we go. So now what happened is it created a static body 3D as a child of our mesh, and it added a collider to that static body 3D. Okay, so now we have a collider, we have a design. Now we can build a level. Honestly, with what I've just shown you, you can create as many mesh instances as you want. Let's call this one platform. One other option that you might want to use for your mesh instance, let's grab another mesh. One of the shapes that you might want to use instead of maybe a box mesh, you can use something called a plane. A plane can be like your standard floor. Let's get this platform out of the way. We'll move it up. Okay, let's call this the floor. Okay, and let me apply a material here, and I'm going to make it green. So as a quick review, what I just did was, let me show you again. I'm going to delete that. Okay. So add child node, mesh instance 3D. I will rename it to floor. Our floor needs a mesh, so we're going to create a new plane mesh. Inside this mesh, I'm going to change the material to a new standard material. Inside this material, I'm going to change the albedo to a green color. Okay, easy enough. And what I can do with this mesh is I can change the size of it here. So I can go, let's say I want it 10 by 10. Okay, there we go. That's still kind of small. I'll probably make it a lot bigger than that for the actual final project, but let's make it 50-50 for now. And maybe a more subtle color, just so that it's not so overwhelming. Probably, oh, that's very bright. I want it to be kind of, that's a little better. Again, it's up to you, however you want to do this. But now I have basically a standard floor in which I can build my platform. So now here's where the real work comes in. Now it's up to you to basically take the stuff that you've just learned. Oh, I need to apply a collider to my static body child. There we go, create. So now I have a collider on my plane. Now it's up to you to add as many meshes as you want. And there's all different kinds. You can use cylinders, cones, there's all kinds of stuff that you can add. But just kind of create an environment in which we can run around. We want an environment, an arena, for instance, where our player can run around and jump on platforms and stuff like that. It doesn't have to be the final version. This can just be a prototype level. Matter of fact, let's save this as prototype. We'll save this scene. This can be our prototype level in which we can build our character and play test it. But just add some stuff, some ramps for them to run up, some platforms, just generally make a fun environment for them to kind of run around in. Spend a lot of time on this, okay? Definitely get used to creating new meshes, creating materials, adding materials to those meshes, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's what we'll do for the next little while. Next time, I will already have my level built, and we will begin talking about how to create a character controller in 3 dimensions. All right, thanks for paying attention, and I'll see you next time.